Just real quick again, I'm going to pass the baskets now, not for the traditional purposes, but I'm going to pass the basket, and please put your question that you want to ask in it, and we'll also have them up there during the break afterwards when we break for lunch. So I'm going to pass those baskets, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tommie and Mary Jane for another hour, and then we'll break for lunch.
Didn't sound.
Now is it? There we are. Okay. It didn't want to go green. Steps 8 and 9. Step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We already had the list, but I don't know about you. My list was huge. All of a sudden I got to there, well, it was all my fault. And a lot of those names came off. And then others went on. So all that is making a list and becoming willing to make amends to them all. It doesn't say we have to rush right out and make the amend. We become willing to make the amend, to see who we had hurt. It's interesting because in the fourth column of the fifth step, the word "my part" is not in that. It says, where were my mistakes? Where had I been wrong? And I always used to think it said, for years, probably 49 and a half years. I don't know. I thought it said what was my parts, indicating, like Mary Jane said, he had a part in it. Well, he had a big part in it, obviously, you know. But no, that word's not even in there. Why are we doing these steps? Why do we experience the steps? It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's a biggie. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I didn't think I could be of any service to anybody, let alone to God. And to try to find myself by trying to help other people. It was all an ego thing for me in the beginning. Ninth step. And I love what, in the eighth step, it's also in italics. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. How long it takes, and it takes these steps and the series of the steps. I used to kind of hodgepodge, do potpourri, and do first, and probably my second month of sobriety, I went to my husband and told him how sorry I was, and he said, you ought to be. I almost drank. I thought the ninth step says, made direct amend to such people wherever possible. And here's the kicker, except when to do so would injure them or others. The ninth step is not about apology. It's not about saying I'm sorry. It says made direct amends, which means change in my dictionary. To put the onus on me. Now, when I slept with somebody else's husband, I wasn't going to go tell her. That's for sure. So it does call for being discreet. If you're going to hurt your families and somebody else directly, it suggests that we pause. I've heard people say, well, I don't go to a lot of those people because it might hurt them, so I'll just stay sober. I don't think that does it. This step says made amends to that person. Now, if they've already died, now what do I do? It was suggested that we write a letter, get it on paper, because we write letters for ourselves anyhow. It's never for the recipient, it's for ourselves. Write a letter, even if they're still alive, and for whatever reason you can't go to them, write a letter. Don't put a return address on it. Just write the letter. Don't use it as an excuse, though, because can we rationalize that. And put it in the mail, and it can go to the dead letter office. And nobody will get it, but you've done an act of making the amend. Other people have written a letter and then read it to me, and then we burned it. Because she was unable, the person had died. But we still need to make the amend. It took me a long time to realize we're experiencing these steps inside of us for our recovery from a fatal illness. So even though the steps are suggested, I remember the first time I heard there were a lot of you betters. And I think that's so important because we are recovering from a fatal illness of mind, body, and spirit. And so those steps are very, very, very important. When I finally got to the 9th step and made an amend to my husband, I can't even tell you what his reaction was, but I know I felt better. And that took about 46 years. I had totally forgotten a particular incident, and I guess God was protecting me from that because I was not yet willing to deal with something that had happened in my life. And it took that long for God to say, okay, Tommie, it's time. And he revealed it to me. And I'll tell you, there was a newfound freedom at somewhere around, I know it was over 40 years because Charlie died in 2003. So it was probably around 2000, 2001. I was sober close to 40 years by that time. And it's interesting, I would have told you that at 7 years, I had completed all the amends I ever needed to make. Because I really felt that. But another 30 years passed when this came to me, and I had talked it over with a very dear friend of mine, and I said, well, he's out in Connecticut, I'm in Michigan. She said, something will happen, and God will take care of it. And she said, the equinox is coming up, where the days and the nights are the same length. And for some reason, that was a very spiritual time for her. And she said, that's next Thursday. And she said, I have a feeling that God will arrange all this. Just make yourself available. I was then in Connecticut. Charlie had remarried and was with his second wife. And all of a sudden, the two of us were in the living room. And I thought, boy, Kathleen, you sure know what you're talking about. And there was my privilege, I will say. I used to say it was an opportunity. But there was my privilege to make my amend to Charlie for my behavior in my early marriage to him, or my early recovery to him, and just before I got sober. So when we are tuned in, when that surrender has happened through the third step, and we start implementing these steps inside of me, where my alcoholism is, that's where I have to do it, inside of me. Not just in my behavior outside, but inside of me where my disease is. Things begin to happen. And we get to this point where, gosh, I am so excited to be a human being, and I'm wondering what's going to happen next, that I'm going to discover something more about me. And I truly believe that we are all born with everything we're ever going to know. I didn't come to AA and then you put me in a people bank and started pushing honesty and truth and newfound knowledge. You hear that, we peel off the layers of the onion, and I really believe that's what happened, because more is being revealed. We've hunted all over AA literature, books, to find out where that word is. More will be revealed. It's not there. But the closest we can come to is that top paragraph on page 164, where God will show us whatever it says exactly. We may get to it before the end of today, I don't know. But it's amazing if we make the commitment to not drink and start the journey, the steps inside of us, where I used to put the alcohol. We find ourselves, and that's so exciting. And how did I learn that? You shared it with me. So it's unbelievable. Well, I can share a little bit about the 10th step. You can do 11 and 12. Sure. Okay. Like we said in the beginning, we didn't know. Did you know when you got sober what was going to happen to you? Yeah, same thing now. It's just like when I stopped drinking. I never know where I'm going to end up. Who would think I'd ever be in Fredrick, Maryland? It's incredible. Absolutely. 10th step. Where are we? Continue to take, I can't find it right now. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. That promptly was amazing to me, because who wanted to say, no, I know, I didn't want to say I was wrong. For years, it had been his fault, her fault, its fault in my emotional immaturity, and I'd had to grow up enough to put the focus on myself. I've questioned over the years, is it like another 4th step? I don't think so anymore. Once I really experienced the 4th step, got that down, and shared that in the 5th step, the 10th step says continue to take personal inventory. And when wrong, not when I was wrong, when wrong, promptly admit it. That is taking the inventory at night when I go to bed. In the 11th step, it talks about on retiring, and then when I get up in the morning on awakening. I could never figure out, why do they put on retiring first? I get up first. I can't retire until I get up. And it was very confusing to me for a long time. Well, then it occurred to me, some wise person in AA said, if you're taking your inventory as you're going to bed, and you get that cleared up, you start the day in a better position. You're finishing the day. Now, I had heard early on in AA, don't go to bed and have anything hang over, still hanging. Finish the day. Otherwise, you're going to take it right into the next day and start the day with all of that. And so I finally realized on retiring was really part of the 10th step. Where had I been short with somebody? Where had I really imposed my will? Where was I flat out wrong? Not very often, I used to say. Gosh, isn't this some program to help us grow up? And so sometimes I could admit it, but not all the time. I just didn't want to reveal too much of me. I didn't want to get well too soon, that kind of thing. But it is such a relieving freedom when I've really experienced these steps in the order in which they were written down. There has been a sense of freedom that is beyond me. One of my greatest gifts is being able to listen to what people say. And I have to tell you a story. This lady woke me up once, a few times. And I used to say with Bill at Ebby's funeral, I'd say, Bill, did it ever occur to you that if Ebby hadn't given the grace to stay sober, that you would have? And Mary Jane reminded me, and I since have changed that story. If it were up to God's grace, everybody would get sober. We don't think that God picks you and you and you and you and you, and maybe you, me. No. If God did it, he'd do it for everybody. And so I've changed that to, Bill, do you think I could change it with Bill because he's long gone, but when I tell the story now, I will say, do you think that if Ebby had stayed sober that you would have? Because it was in Bill trying to 12-step Ebby that Bill discovered himself. And that to me is one of the classic examples that thank God I can listen when somebody cares enough to point out, to have me look at the same thing in a little different way. And that to me is one of the biggest assets I have in this fellowship. When somebody will say to me, take a look at this, what do you think? And that's what Mary Jane did for me, among other things she's done for me, but I'll give her credit for that right now. So the 10-step is very important to me. It removes that sneaking around the corner, avoiding people. As long as I don't do it to hurt them, really, in front of other people. It's just been a remarkable journey for me, coming to know myself enough that I want to live with me some more. And that's one of the greatest gifts, being able to live with a person I drank to get away from. Wow. And to do God's grace, do God's will, what I believe is my responsibility to fit myself, to be of maximum service to the God of my understanding and to others about me. Your turn.
I'm going to step back a minute and then make a run. But, I just wanted to, I've got a couple of copies of this 8th Step article that the same guy, Don P. from Denver, wrote, because he got sober in prison. And if you can do a 9th step in prison, why can't we do it, you know? I think that's extreme, but he was able to begin to get free. And Tommie was, when Tommie said the word freedom, it really struck me. just a week or so ago, when I was at the women's meeting there, a girl actually said out loud something that I've thought for a long time. Sometimes people who are locked up feel freer because they're safer in prison. And she actually said that. She said, you know, I feel safer in here. I'm freer in here. But Don P. got sober in prison and then started working the recovery program in prison. And he was saying, he gave me the key to freedom, this sponsor that he had in prison. I was to close my eyes and picture each person separately in front of me. I was to look each straight in the eye and see if I could feel a willingness to say, I have been wrong and have caused you harm. Will you please tell me what I must do so that we can get the books to balance? Because I think a lot of people think that it's a matter of saying, I'm sorry, or stuff. But I think prayerfully to look the guy in the eye and say, how can I make this right? I know I harmed you. And take the responsibility and do whatever he says. And I found this pretty helpful, but it can be done anywhere. And you know, if you happen to be locked up, that's where you can start. So I'm going to leave that, and maybe you guys may want to make some copies or something, but if you like, or just take a look. The whole business of making amends was a real, once again, a real life changer for me. And then 10, I was talking to somebody last night about how do you ever have to write a fourth step again, or do you just use 10? The answer for me is yes and no. I don't have a short answer for that. Here's the thing. Are you looking for loopholes? You know? Or should you really do another whole fourth step? Sometimes, yes. That's really what should be done. Sometimes you're just going to write and write and write and write, because then you don't ever have to do anything about that. You know? And so in that case, it's a matter of just 10. Which is no simple thing either. I don't mean to say that that's the light version, because it's not. It's important. It's significant. That's the entrance to the world of the Spirit, it says. It says we continued to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when these crop up, not if. I find comfort in that. You know, the guys are saying, it's not over, it's never over. The shelling has stopped, but it's never over. And, you know, just every day, you know, I find myself doing appalling things today. And it is very disappointing. And I really don't want to tell anybody about it either, you know. But so there's no end in sight. But don't cheat yourself by negotiating for a lesser sentence, you know. So I think that sometimes it is just a matter. Sometimes we have a tendency to make a big deal out of something that's nothing. Sometimes we take a big deal and try and make nothing out of it. So willingness and it's all in here too. It really is. Step 11, I'm having wonderful new experiences with periodically. I always thought prayer and meditation was in the sky and clouds and rainbows and crystals, and I get it's way more practical for me today. I love the whole thing of unawakening and when we retire at night, just because I think it covers all the bases. And if I use those as a real prescription for me, and I printed it all out so that I have little copies of it that I carry around with me. It's portable. And that was one of my earliest concerns when I came to AA. If I leave town, will I still be safe? And Mac, my first sponsor, when he gave me the 24-hour book, he wrote in the beginning of it, "This is for you, it's portable." I didn't know that either. Would it be okay if because I needed to make a living and I had to travel around. And it has proven to be most portable. It is very portable. It works all over the world. But I like having the directions, the specific instructions. I feel very safe in reading exactly what it says in the 11th step. And it sounds kind of fluffy when you think about just prayer and meditation and all that. That's how it was for me, but I have found that it's infinitely specifically practical. And so I read it. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness and watch for those things, and when they occur, we turn in prayer. We turn our thoughts to someone we can help. If I can get out of my head, I've got a way better chance of not screwing up any worse for the rest of that day. So to turn and every place in the book that it talks about, if we find sex to be especially troublesome, it says, who could we help? That's the only thing that gives us some relief from most of the problems that are specifically described. How to get out of myself. If I can for a minute or two think about somebody else's welfare or be concerned for somebody new, or the phone rings, even when I don't have it going for me, somebody calls up and I can, and I don't want to, you know. The one that comes to my mind right this minute is a lady who, when I was in upstate New York, I went to this meeting because I was looking for a sponsor. I needed a sponsor. I needed a lot of help. Don had joined this community, and here I was in upstate New York. The big book was just a rumor. And I called Marceline to tell her about them too. They didn't even have big books, and you know. So she says, "Well, you go back next week and be sure you bring your book." You know. So, but I went to this meeting because I was looking for a sponsor and I was hoping to get some help because I needed a lot of help. This girl came up to me and said, would I sponsor her? I thought, oh, gee. Listen, lady, I got a lot of problems, you know. And she was on the lam from New York. She had run off with this man, and she took her 3 kids with her, and so I started to think, well, yeah, she really does have some problems there, doesn't she? I said, okay, all right, okay, but I'm not sure what we ought to do, but I'll come to you. You come to my house every Tuesday, and we'll go through the book, because that's all I knew to do. And she says, well, I got these 3 kids. I said, okay, I'll come to your house. I said, but we're not going to talk about curtains and peanut butter. You know, we're going to get after it. Is that agreeable to you? Are you willing to do all this? She said, yeah, I am, in this funny British accent. So I said, okay. And you know what? Now she's another lady that I sponsor moved down to Myrtle Beach and goes to the same meeting as she does now. This is like 20-some years later. All those 3 kids have gotten through college. One of them went through West Point, and that lady's still sober. And here's the thing. It helped Jerry a lot, but it helped me to get out of myself. I get so self-absorbed, and that my problems are so significant. And geez, what do you want from me? You know, 'cause I give and I give and I give. Is there no rest? You know. But what a blessing it is when you have something meaningful to do, and it does get you out of your own self. But I see again and again and again, the answer always is not in going off to meditate about something. It's seeing where I can be useful or helpful to somebody else to get to the meeting early. And the whole business of carrying this message and finding ways to be helpful has to do with finding somebody. Terry just walked out, but we have a mutual friend, a buddy named Kevin up in Rhode Island. Kevin was sponsoring a new guy, and the new guy came to the meeting and he said, "Hey, Kevin, why didn't you call me this week?" Kevin says, "I don't want what you have." The thing is, it's not Kevin's job to call the new guy. It's the new guy's job to call Kevin, you know. But you know, it's a very good thing every once in a while. If nobody has asked me to sponsor them in a very long time, it's a good time for me to say, doesn't anybody want what I have? And maybe I need to take a look at how I'm acting. Another one of my tip-offs is, if I'm at odds with more than 3 people, it may be me, you know. Because every once in a while I'll hear myself saying to somebody, "Oh, she's a nut. He's nuts. She's crazy." You know, and I think, whoa. You know? When I was working, I used to have that as my checklist. If I got on the elevator and there was something the matter with everybody in the elevator, by the time I got off, I knew it was me. I knew it was me. And if you look around and you find that there's something the matter with a lot of the people that you know real well, it may be time to take a good look again, you know. But we have to find people to work with, and I don't get to just wait at home for somebody to plead with me. You know, I have to be there. My name has to be on the list down at the central office. How else am I going to get a 12-step call? How do they know who I am? So my name is on the list down at the central office and also at the intergroup office. And that's the first thing. And talk about that at my home group. A lot of groups will give their whole group list to the central office or to the intergroup office to have. And if they can't reach one, it's harder and harder. If you're working on the desk at intergroup, it's harder and harder to find somebody these days because everybody's got cell phones and answering machines and stuff like that. And very, very often you just get a recording, and you can't leave it at that. You know, I've got somebody that I need for you to pick up for a meeting at 7. You can't trust that they get that message, so you got to keep calling people until you can finally connect with a real person. So they need way more names, and it usually boils down to just a few regulars, trusted people that you can that you know you can always depend on, and they'll drop everything and they'll go, and that's a great thing. But at any rate, that's one of the ways to make sure that there's you know, we got to do our part, make ourselves available. And like I said, get into the meeting early and visit with the people. And if there's somebody there who you haven't seen before, make sure that you talk to them. Make sure at my home group that nobody ever leaves there without being spoken to individually. And are they new in the area? Do they need a meeting schedule? Just make a contact, a connection. Because lots of times I'm going thinking, you know, well, nobody talked to me today, you know. Well, reach out my own hand. It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Whew. Isn't that the truth? We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. So, is everybody familiar with these parts on page 86 and 87 about on awakening and when we retire at night, and about all through the day when we pause, when we're agitated or distressed or upset? Just stop what you're doing and take a break out and kind of get back to sane. All through the day, a prayer that we will be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. Isn't that better than just blowing our top and just flipping out and being nuts? As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show. Thy will be done. Over and over, thy will be done. I learned that, Bill Wilson had a lot of trouble with depression, and I have had a lot of problems with it as well. I looked up, as Bill sees it, under depression, some of the things that he tried. One of them was he would just make himself walk, putting one foot in front of the other, just making himself do it. Because otherwise you just want to sit there and die from the inside out. It's all black anyways. I started trying to do that. Then I heard about repetitive prayer, constant repetitive prayer. It's an ancient practice that people have used for years. Our book says, be quick to make use of practices that have, better people than we have tried all these things. Make use of it if it's helpful for you. I started using repetitive prayer. The one that you hear most often is the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And you say it over and over and over and over. And while you're driving, while you're peeling carrots, whatever, just, where I say it? Is at a business meeting. And when I hear somebody talking stupid, I'm sitting there going, because inside I'm saying, inside I'm just sitting there saying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. They don't know that. And I'm not making faces at them. So repetitive prayer mixed with making one foot go in front of the other and just pushing myself out the door, the two together seem just perfect. And it's the breathing. Breathe in and breathe out. And the Jesus prayer kind of made me a little goofy. So I do the thy kingdom come, thy will be done, over and over and over. It was explained to me that if I would work for the prayer will work for me. And today, when my butt hits the chair in the dentist office, the prayer starts up. It just starts up. If I have a close call in traffic, the prayer starts up. And that's what was explained to me. And today I believe that it's just, it's not a trick anymore. It's just salvation for me. It keeps me in a better place to repetitive prayer. And that's this, that's what it says in our book. We sought, I'm seeking through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand Him. Praying only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. It's not a matter of my telling God what He needs to do anymore. I really don't pray for stuff, even personal stuff. It's a matter of God knows how to be God. I really believe that. And it's a matter of my trying to attune myself with His will. If I can, and sometimes I don't know what His will for me is, but I know what He wouldn't want me doing. Lots of times that's easy, so at least I can quit doing what I'm doing. But the repetitive prayer, if that's useful for you, I hope you give it a shot. It's been enormously helpful for me in so many different ways. And so that's part of my 11th-step practice. And 12, of course, carrying this message. What a privilege, what an opportunity, what a responsibility. Looking for people to be helpful to and getting out of self. practicing these principles. How do you, I asked a guy that I knew one time who I thought was the world's champion 12-stepper, how he learned how to do that, because I marveled at what he was able to do. This was in Texas, and his name was Bob White, and he was just bigger than life, and people were drawn to him. And he called all the guys cowboy, and he called all the girls sugar, and he was just a wonderful man. And but I asked him how he knew how to go about carrying this message, and he said, "You just practice." That's what it says, and you get good at it because you're not so nervous anymore. You're not so self-conscious. You try and perceive what this person needs today, and most often they just need something to hang on to. Linda is one who talks about the slogans, first things first, let go and let God. She calls them sometimes they're the handrails. You're not in a good place to work on the steps that day because you're up to your butt in alligators, but you can hang on to the handrails, just the little easy does-its, the little handy tips. That whole Living Sober book, it doesn't say on the cover of the Living Sober book, you can bet the farm on this book. It just says, these are just handy tips, just stuff to hang on to until, you can get back to being sane and working with somebody and going back to the book. So just hanging on sometimes. And but I think that the whole thing, Dr. Bob's last message, the whole thing boils down to love and service. And we all know what love is, and we all know what service is. It's not that big of a mystery. A lot of it is so amazingly simple if we do. And the people in Nashville have a little habit, too, of reading 2 pages of the book every day. Not 4 pages, not 1 page, 2 pages. There's a discipline to that. And of course, they've got it all figured out. Do you? I think that's wonderful. You want to talk about that, Tommie? Hey, that's great.
I read 2 pages every day. I have a little magnet book back here. Right now I'm on Jimmy Burwell's story.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me.
Oh. And he's a local guy. Yeah. Jimmy Burwell is, God as I understand it. Was a real close friend of Bill's and is buried in Maryland in the same cemetery as Fitzmayo and some of those older guys. And Tommie actually served at the General Service Conference with his wife, Rosa Burwell. Mm-hmm. So isn't that thrilling to you guys that these are real people? They're real people. They were regular people. They screwed up. They were drunks. And they came through the other end and continue to inspire us 75 years later. Jeez. But I think that's a wonderful practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were talking about how do we sponsor? The preamble says we share our experience, strength, and hope. It's that simple. People have said, well, I can't sponsor, I'm not sober long enough. Bill Wilson was 6 months sober when he met Dr. Bob. I'm glad he didn't say that. He had his experience, his strength, and his hope up to that time. And that's how he gained more experience, strength, and hope, by sharing what he had. So I don't think anybody is too new. If we're asked, then somebody wants what they think we had. When I met my sponsor, I wanted what she had. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted it. And remarkable changes happened in my life. But anyhow, are we supposed to break at noon? Okay. And we'll be back at 1 o'clock.